Welcome everyone to another episode of eXhuming the X-Files here on the Outpost Unknown YouTube channel. If you like hearing two fans talk about one of their favorite shows every Friday night, then press that like and subscribe. I just want to throw a big shout out to all the subscribers we've been getting from this, Jeremy. I kind of look at this, I think we're up to like 15 new subscribers to the channel just based on episodes of this show. Does that make you happy, or does that make you a little concerned that we're starting to get a following?
Nah, that's a great thing. I mean, hey, all you new subscribers out there, thank you for enjoying this content.
Yeah, we're enjoying walking through this sort of memory lane that is the X-Files. So tonight we are going to be heading to Buffalo, New York, and we're going to figure out what's going on with a freaky little girl who might be throwing people out of windows with her mind. We are talking the episode Born Again, directed by Gerald Freeman, written by Alex Ganza and Howard Gordon. Of course, Alex Ganza and Howard Gordon, they did Conduit, Ghost in the Machine, Fallen Angel, Lazarus. These are sort of two of the most famous writers of X-Files episodes over the years. So we're going to see what they're doing with this one. I'll turn it over to you, Jeremy. Tell us a little bit about Born Again.
All right. Well, we've got another episode where a little kid may be responsible for the death of adults.
Yes.
Starts with a police detective finds a little girl like huddled alone, brings her down to the precinct. For some reason, they decide to bring in another detective to grill her about stuff.
Well, it starts with that good old-fashioned workplace sexual harassment.
Oh, yeah. I actually had that written down. The very top note is the first words are sexual harassment.
We were on the same page. I'm like, wow. I mean, it's not even, they don't even try to hide it. This guy's basically like eye humping this detective immediately.
And, I mean, she's kind of open to it, you know. You watch those videos at work telling you about what is sexual harassment, what is not, and it's if she's not open for it, then it's sexual harassment.
Yes.
It came across as sleazy, but she didn't like shut it down. So
yeah, she played it like she was flattered by it in a way.
All right, and so sleazy guy goes in, starts talking to the girl. The main detective lady leaves. He gets flung out of the window to his death, and then they run in. You know, they were locked in there, I guess, with just this little girl, and no explanation as to what happened. But the girl certainly didn't use her own muscles to chuck him out.
Yeah, she's got that mean-looking mug on her face. Like, oh man, there's something going on with this little girl. And I think that cop even mentions it later on to Scully or something. Like, there's something strange going on with this little girl.
Yeah, well, I mean, she did the dead eye stare thing like the girls from Eve did, but only better.
Yeah.
100%. And so they, Mulder and Scully, which I have a second note here, is Tooms. The Tooms episode. Yep. They actually make mention of why they're involved in this case, is because somebody heard that they
that
had
was literally my second note too.
All right, we're take it away, Matt. We just got the same shit written down.
But that's one of the things I loved about this show just in general. I like when they sort of make mentions to previous things that have occurred on the show. And it gets to that point where we already know that sort of like Mulder is really well known. They've established that in season 1. Everybody in the FBI seems to know Mulder and his reputation, and he's super, super great at his job, but he's spooky, right? He's into this weird stuff, but everyone kind of respects his sort of intelligence and his ability as an FBI agent. But and we kind of get to see this here. It's not just Mulder, but it's also Scully as well. Like, hey, we heard what you did on that Tooms case. It's just kind of a cool piece of like world building that even like detectives in, I don't know where this took place, or Buffalo, New York, some small town detective in Buffalo, New York has heard of Mulder and Scully already. Kind of cool world building.
Sure. So, yep, well, they show up and it's time to start talking to the kid, talking to the people. They have her do a composite sketch of who threw the detective out of the window in like this dark, dingy hotel room. And you realize that, like, looking back through some of these episodes and even forward, I started noticing it when they want to hide what's going on in the background. They just turn the lights off for everything.
Yep.
And
I,
it's clear that they're in just kind of a cheap, shitty hotel room, but they do the detective deposit or composite sketch of the killer, and it's so weak. Every time they do a drawing of somebody, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it looks like titty gorilla, it looks like a fucking Bigfoot and shit." Like drawing the lines between whatever they drew on this paper, and it's like, yeah, that looks exactly like a detective who died in a gangland murder 9 years ago or some shit.
yeah.
I don't believe it at all.
Yeah, they do a really poor job of the actual sketches, and I don't know if it was in the next episode in Roland. There's one of these episodes they do another police sketch or something, and I was just kind of like, they all like you're right, they all look really weak, and I don't know if it was just like the technology at the time wasn't great, but I feel like I remember watching Unsolved Mysteries, and Robert Stack would put up some sort of, sketch, and they all looked way better than anything that's presented on this show. So it
Absolutely.
can't be that. I don't know, low effort or something.
And so they get the composite sketch. They compare it to this other guy. They go talk to this girl's mom, and like mom does. I kind of like that scene a little bit, and mom doesn't take the trope way out of the conversation. Like my baby is not capable of doing anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with her. Mom is kind of like, yeah, that bitch be crazy.
Yeah,
Like,
that gets fucked up. There's something wrong with my kid here. I love when they make the origami hawk, or the little girl makes the origami hawk, and she like
yeah,
throws it out the window, and Mulder picks it up. All three of them, Mulder, Scully, and the mom, are just fucking amazed at this origami hawk. They do that hilarious thing where it's super serious, like, it's origami. And then like Mulder's like, I know. How did she learn to do this? Like origami is the most amazing thing that anybody
yeah.
could possibly do.
My 12-year-old girl had just recently got into it, and now there's little folded pieces of paper everywhere. I don't. It's not a big deal. Like it's cool, but she doesn't come across as some sort of savant or something like that. Like they
Right.
propped. I'll go back to the Eve girls. Is they prop these girls up as kind of smarter or more intelligent, at least in the background. Not that the adults have viewed them that way, but there's nothing special about this girl. She's just very dead eyed, and she just happens to be wherever these people are being murdered.
She, I'm trying to remember. Does she even say any lines in this episode? If she
I
does, it's very brief. It's
yeah,
basically just her looking and staring ominously at stuff.
it wasn't me. Like shit, like
Yeah.
that probably. Um, God, okay, so they end up go or what was it? They end up finding out about the some detective, some guy's ex partner that's featured frequently throughout the episode. He was killed with with a chainsaw. Like they cut up his body and stuff because he crossed the triad. And what was funny
And when they
is,
cut his arm off and took out his eye or something like
yeah,
that,
yeah,
right?
and the the guys that were involved, you end up finding out ultimately that, well, maybe I'm jumping too far ahead, but that some cops found some money on a bust, and they all wanted to keep the money, and this particular guy was just too clean, so they had to kill him. They made him look like they ripped off the triad. They make it look like the triad killed him, and then they were gonna wait like 10 years, like what was that movie?
A Simple Plan.
Simple Plan. You know exactly what I'm
Yeah.
talking about.
Great movie, by the way.
It really is. And they were going to split the money up, but 9 years later, before the anniversary of them going out and spending this money, some little kid that was born way back then is apparently being followed around by a ghost, which also was the plot of another episode that we had earlier in the season. But all right, so
Shadows. Yeah,
there,
and I have a quick comment about what you just said there. Is as I was doing research for this, the writer Howard Gordon expressed his disappointment with the episode feeling that it was too similar to his earlier work on the episode Shadows, and finding that it was, quote, not done particularly interestingly. And series creator Chris Carter also felt that Born Again was, quote, just not one of his favorites, unquote, adding that he thought the direction was a little sloppy, but it's one of those episodes that plays a little closer to reality, and I like that about it. David Duchovny reportedly detested the episode, despite a guest appearance by his then girlfriend, Maggie Wheeler. So the lady cop apparently was dating David Duchovny at the time.
Hmm. All right.
The more you know.
Then, okay, so the cops are arguing about what happened to this guy, talking about he uses the word "it was an accident." Now they purposefully killed this guy and cut up his body with a chainsaw. So how do you how do you say that you cut up a guy with a chainsaw accidentally? Is one of my notes here. So okay, so they have this argument. Guy's gonna keep shut or his mouth shut. Ends up getting on a city bus after dark, and he gets off of it, and the door like pinches on his arm or something, and drags him for all of 30 seconds, and somehow he just dies.
Well, the
And the little girl
scarf.
is on the
Remember that
bus.
scarf gets wrapped around his throat.
Oh
And
no, the scene was so dark I didn't see shit.
okay, yeah, yeah. So he's got like this scarf on, and it gets caught in the door, and he's banging on the door of the bus, like, "Hey, you got to open the door." And then the bus just starts driving because the ghost or whatever is pressing down on the gas pedal, and the bus driver's like, "Oh my god, I can't stop it!" And then basically it strangles him as he's being sort of drugged by the bus. And then you see the like the little girl is in the seat behind him, like watching this. Now, what's hilarious about this scene and is if you look at it, it's a black bus driver, but then when they cut to the wide shot of the front of the bus, it's like an old white bus driver. And then they cut back in, and it's the black bus driver again. They did not do a good job sort of matching the drivers from shot to shot in this, but yeah, he gets strangled by a scarf.
All right. I thought he got drugged to death, but he did not get drugged very far. So that guy dies. They go visit the dead dude's part, the guy that died 9 years ago's partner. Find out that his partner married this guy's wife,
Yeah.
and this guy's wife keeps his origami collection like out in the open on a little plate on display 9 years later. Like they had to tie in the origami to the kid a little bit, but like, why would you have your dead husband's like folded paper out on the mantelpiece?
It's
I just
weird.
never understood it, other than that piece of it. Not long after that, like Fox is jumping to huge conclusions as he normally does, but Scully like goes way out of her way to just dress Fox down and say nothing of what you're talking about is actionable evidence. Like
Yeah.
not even kind of.
Yeah.
So she gets super mad about it too.
I love that line. I actually wrote it down that Mulder says to her. He's like, and he says it with such passion. He goes, "Short of her growing a mustache, how much more evidence do you need, Scully?" I'm sitting there thinking, like, dude, you got nothing here. Like,
Yeah,
you got
nothing.
no evidence whatsoever that this little girl's involved, other than she happens to be around. At one point, he's like, "It's psychokinesis." Like the girls got psychokinesis, I guess, kind of like. Oh, would it be would Firestarter be
Now
psychokinesis?
it's pyrokinesis.
That's pyrokinesis. It'd be like Carrie, I guess, right? So it'd be sort of like Carrie-esque telekinetic abilities or something. Yeah, but Scully's not having any of this.
So we cut back after that to the partner that's married to the wife. He's freaking out because he just found out that the dude got strangled by a bus and he thinks he's next. He immediately start yelling at his wife like, "You got to trust me. You got to pack your shit. We got to go." And
I'm your husband. Trust me.
she will not react for nothing. Like, I am not getting out of my pajamas. I want you to tell me what the fuck is going on. Like, just take his word for it.
Okay, honey.
And
Whatever you say.
then you find through like some sort of what was it? They had a picture that flashed when they were recording the little girl or something like that, and they were
Yeah.
enhancing it.
Yeah, it was like, didn't one of the people die, like, in an aquarium, like, drowned or something, and then there was, like, a little aquarium
Well,
item or
it was his
something?
own aquarium. They drowned him in his own aquarium because the
Yeah.
picture ended up being like the little scuba diver dude
Yeah.
that's in the bottom of a
It
fish
was the
tank.
last thing he saw before he died or something.
So we cut back to the scene in the apartment. Like the ghost is there of this guy. He's trying to take out his ex partner. They do this like snake electrical cord thing that was just really bad. Not quite as bad as the werewolves earlier in the season, but pretty bad as far as
Yeah, my
an
notes for
effect
this
goes.
whole end is super cheesy.
Yeah.
That's what I wrote down
Oh
here.
yeah. Well, it's kind of like a weak ass thing where in Poltergeist where things are flying around a room
Yeah.
because next thing you know, knickknacks are flying off the wall at him. Like, okay, you're gonna kill him with little statues of shit. No, that ain't gonna work.
He's apologizing and whatnot to the little girl because by this point, like, obviously we as the audience understand that this dead dude is, I don't know if his spirit is in this little girl. They didn't really explain
Explain
exactly
any of that. Yeah,
what's happening, but I guess it's supposed to be like he's using this little girl as the vessel for him to be able to exact his revenge. And this guy's like apologizing to this little girl, like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. It was my fault. I was involved in it." And then Mulder and Scully are trying to get the little girl to not murder this guy.
yeah,
It just feels lame.
yeah.
Like, this whole ending to me just felt kind of weak.
The the fish tank explodes, and I have a note here that Charlie, the name of the ghost, he killed all the fish as they also played their role in his own murder. And then I don't really have like the episode just kind of ends, and the only thing that I have left on my notes is that the date that they marked was April 19th, 1994. And I'm thinking, didn't everything in this show start like sometime in November of 1993?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this aired on April 29th of 1994. So maybe they
Yeah.
were kind of like, I don't know, thinking ahead or something like that when they filmed this, because certainly they would have had to have filmed this, I don't know, prior to that date at some point. But
Well, no, the only reason I mention it is, well, when as far as what happens in the episodes themselves, when did this timeline technically start where Mulder and Scully came together in the pilot season episode?
oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
Because all it
Yeah,
has all of this shit, everything that has happened between pilot and Born Again happened in like 6 months time.
yeah, that's a good point.
It's
That's a good point. And it makes more sense when Mulder yells at her, is like, "After all you've seen, how is it so hard for you to believe?" All the stuff. This is one of those episodes that kind of like has the characters repeat the same stuff we've already heard them say to each other in previous episodes. And I think that's one of the things that stands out to me about this is I felt that this episode was just one of the, I wouldn't say it's awful. Like, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's awful, but it's almost like a completely forgettable episode.
yeah,
Where it's like I've already seen this before. We saw this earlier on with, the lady who was at work and her old boss, whatever, was the ghost trying to protect her, and we've seen the telekinetic shit being thrown at people. And yeah, it feels like we've already seen this episode in a
sure.
better version of it earlier in the season, and there's just nothing new here.
And we're coming off of a high from Beyond the Sea, and then we had Tombs, was the very last
Yeah.
episode that we would have watched before that, and that was an excellent episode. So come
Yep.
to have to run into something this boring. Yeah, this episode was completely forgettable. I don't remember anything about it from my childhood.
Yeah. And stick around in a few episodes, folks, because we are going to do our season one wrap up after we finished each one of these. And we're going to talk about the ups and downs of season one and sort of our top five best episodes and worst episodes. But yeah, I think this is one of the aspects of your initial season. It's, they not all of these are going to work like they wanted them to work. They put out some amazing epic episodes, but then if this felt like a filler type episode where they didn't have enough story or storylines to even fill up 24 episodes, so they started kind of recycling stuff. And we're even going to see this again in the next episode with Roland. This is once again somebody kind of inhabiting the body of another person to do shit. So I mean, this is, I don't know, it's like a recurring motif in episode one here. I did think it was interesting that they have normally in previous episodes, Scully is doing the voiceover. So at the beginning of season one, that was kind of a recurring thing. At the end of each episode, Scully would be typing up and writing up her report for the cigarette smoking man and for her, supervisors. And you'd always get that last sort of thing, with a voiceover her and she's in front of her computer. They kind of got away from that as it went on because, of course, how many times do we need to see that over and over and over? But I did think it was interesting. This time they had Mulder doing it. So Mulder was actually doing the voiceover narration instead of Scully, and kind of writing the report, which I don't know if we'd seen that before. So I thought that was interesting, but there's just not a whole lot to talk about. I mean, is there anything else in this episode that stood out to you, or you thought was memorable enough to really discuss?
Not really. It wasn't my favorite episode. I was glad that it was over.
Okay. I do have some facts here that I'll go ahead and read, just some of the stuff. Several crew members disliked the episode, most notably Gordon and Duchovny, which I kind of mentioned. And then Gillian Anderson actually was pregnant with her first child in the latter stages of season one. This is the first episode in which it's fairly obvious that she's expecting, with a pronounced use of trench coats to cover up her baby bump. And that was literally it for the for the facts and interesting things about this episode. There wasn't anything really on Wikipedia. There wasn't really anything on IMDb that I could find. There just isn't much to say about Born Again. And so this is a quick and dirty episode, folks. That's all we got.
Oh, yeah.
and that's totally fine. So thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of Exhuming the X-Files. Next week, we will be back next Friday with a look at Roland, which is the penultimate episode of Season 1. We will find out, is that any better? Do we have more to talk about with Roland than we do with Born Again? We shall see. Catch you next week, everybody. See you then.